I want to show you 3 short clips from CEOs talking about how they create value for stakeholders, because this is the cornerstone of thinking about a new story about business and society, of thinking about our goal here, which is to think differently about business and to make it better. First, John Mackey, CEO, co-CEO, co-founder of Whole Foods Markets. Can you say some more about this culture creation, how you do that at Whole Foods Markets?
Well, the way I think about it is that it starts with that purpose in the center, and then the stakeholders radiate out like spokes on a wheel and are connected to that purpose. And then the culture aspects are all the things that unite the stakeholders to the fulfillment of the purpose, so the purpose satisfying the stakeholders. And the culture are means, structures, processes, strategies to do that. How do we create that at Whole Foods? We co-create it. The stakeholders involved in that creation. But once you've internalized that purpose and once you have a stakeholder model, then you can examine the culture that exists and say that's not really serving us in terms of our mission or our purpose, or in terms of creating value for stakeholders. So we've got to evolve that or get rid of that. And this type of strategy, so for example, Whole Foods is organized into teams, into self-managing work teams. And that helps the team members, the employees, we call team members at Whole Foods, that helps them to flourish. And if they flourish, if they're happy in their work and they're creative, and that helps them to serve the customers better. Of course, if they're serving the customers better, the business is going to flourish, and that'll serve the investors because the business will be more profitable. So by having that type of team structure, that's a cultural, organizational value at our company that helps serve the purpose and the stakeholder groups. There's literally dozens and dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of cultural aspects of Whole Foods that have evolved over time that serve the mission and the stakeholder model.
Next, I'd like you to listen to Kip Tindell, co-founder and CEO of The Container Store. We talked a lot about what we call stakeholder theory, the idea that what companies really do is they create value for customers, suppliers, employees, communities, and people with the money. And a lot of people have said to me, as one of the people who write about this a lot, they've said, you know, how does, that's a great theory, but you know, can it work in practice? And you've always run the Container Store, it seems to me, along those stakeholder lines, the same way John Mackey's run Whole Foods along those lines. A lot of companies have done that. So how did you come to understand, I think you said somewhere, businesses are comprised of interdependent sets of stakeholders. How did you come to realize that? Was that just an intuitive thing as an entrepreneur, or did the light bulb go on one day, or is that just the way you've always been?
Well, I think, no, I mean, we think about it, we talk about it. Nobody knows more. It's fun talking to you about this. Nobody knows more about this topic than you. But let's take the vendor as one of the stakeholders. You know, I mean, so primarily we have the employees and the customers and the vendors and the shareholders and the community, and there's more. But it's how is the little Container Store going to compete with the mass merchants? You know, we can't beat Walmart on volume, but we can beat, and we do beat Walmart on relationship building, creatively crafting a mutually beneficial relationship with that vendor. You know, and so
the vendors want to make you better because of that.
Yeah. I mean, we're creatively, you know, rather than laying awake at night trying to figure out how to screw each other around, we're actually laying awake at night trying to figure out how we can synergistically you know, improve that relationship, and it's thrilling. It's more profitable than any other way. I would dare say that most of our vendors will tell you that the Container Store is their favorite customer. You know, I mean, we do things for them. We loan them money. We we buy a shrink wrap machine for them. We pay all of our bills on time because we can afford to do that, and they can't. A retailer gets paid immediately. A vendor gets paid, 60 days later. And so you create synergies. Somebody gets the last pallet of whatever the hot item is that Christmas. Somebody gets the best price in the country. And through this very creatively extensive, hopefully many years of creating a true partnership with that manufacturer, you can enhance the profitability of both sides far more than any other approach. And it not only enriches your lives and in the life of the people you're doing business with, it actually works better than any other methodology too. If all you really want to do is make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, I would submit to you that that's the way to do it. And the same goes for the employees. The same goes, as you know so well, balancing the needs of all those stakeholders allows for a really enduring, long-term, and increasingly synergistic build of the business. And when I look at companies that are really dominant in their niche or doing what they're doing better than anybody else, they all possess that same mindset, that same approach to business. And in any human relationship, if one party's taking advantage of the other, it doesn't last very long, or you hope it doesn't last very long. So,
if you one of the ways of thinking about business that's fairly dominant in our world is that it's only shareholders that matter. It's only the people who are investors that matter. And I realize the Container Store is a privately owned company, but suppose for a minute that
we still have shareholders.
Yeah, you still have shareholders. Think for a moment, if you only had to worry about shareholders, if you only had to worry about the investors, what would the Container Store be like? Yeah. So you didn't worry about employees the way you did. You didn't worry about vendors.
Well, it wouldn't have the Container Store yummy culture, and it's the culture that drives the value. So it wouldn't exist. I mean, if you myopically focus only on the shareholder, as business schools have taught people to do for decades, if you myopically focus on the shareholder, it loses the magic. You don't have a business, or you don't have a very good one. And I think that companies that continue to companies that don't evolve into this approach, this sort of stakeholder model, conscious capitalism method of doing business, are going to lose out. The great thing about it, what we call conscious capitalism in our foundation principles, that kind of purpose-driven and values-driven methodology of doing business. If you look at the companies that do that, Whole Foods, Southwest Airlines, Google, Trader Joe's, they do better than anybody else. I mean, there's been studies made that suggest that it's perhaps 6 or 8 times the S&P index. It's not 2 or 3 times. So what's interesting about conscious capitalism, I think, is that pretty soon most people are going to do it, because a good capitalist is going to eventually adopt that methodology which is most successful, right? I mean, we're out there, speaking about how great it is to do it, but I think most people will do it eventually.
Yeah.
The myopic focus only on the shareholder alienates the employee, it alienates the vendor, it alienates even the customer, ironically, and the way that so many technology companies, today take care of the customer better than the old guard banks take care of the. You don't really trust that bank. You think they're trying to get in your pocket too much. But this technology company will say, "Hey, don't order this book. You ordered it 6 months ago. You forgot.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you." They're looking out for you. They're on your side a bit, and so it's I think the way to do it. We pay 50 to 100% above industry average.
Right.
And so it'd be so easy for a shareholder to demand that you not do that. But that's not their money. That's the employees' money. We actually we don't constantly nickel and dime the vendors to the point that we want them to be profitable too. I think we're intelligent enough to creatively craft that mutually beneficial relationship. Andrew Carnegie was laying on his deathbed in the Adirondacks, and a cub reporter from the New York Times came up and said, hey, you know, you're probably the most successful industrialist of all time. Is there anything you attribute your incredible business success to? And he said, yeah, there is. There's one beacon, one guiding light that I attribute all my business success to, and that is fill the other guy's basket to the brim. Making money then becomes an easy proposition. Fill the other guy's basket to the brim. Making money then becomes an easy proposition. That sounds like something that an investor, a shareholder, would hate to hear a CEO say, but it actually does work.
I actually think that principle, fill the other guy's basket to the brim, is the best articulation of what stakeholder theory is that I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. If you fill that stakeholder's basket to the brim, making money is going to take care of itself. Finally, listen to Tom Gardner at The Motley Fool. I think there's a large recognition that the current business model, the current narrative, business is about the money, it's only profits that matter, people are competitive and self-interested, and that's all that matters. Business people lie, cheat, and steal more than the average, and then by some magic the greatest good emerges. That sort of caricature of the model of business that's in our culture is changing. It changed in a whole bunch of directions toward people worried about corporate responsibility, towards sustainability, towards a more stakeholder-oriented idea like conscious capitalism, etc. What do we need to do as individuals to hasten that change, to, if you like, bring the principles of conscious capitalism more to the center, to encourage more of that thinking? Because the old model is still, has a grip on much of the business world as well.
I think I'm a believer in appropriately placed positive reinforcement. And so I'm a bigger fan of identifying the companies that are doing what it appears to be effective, appears to serve many stakeholders simultaneously. We were talking before about super alignment, what I call super alignment. You're much more articulate on this than I am, Ed, but the things that actually cause all stakeholders to benefit simultaneously. So it's not a trade-off. If I lower prices for customers, I'm going to have to lower salaries for employees. If I'm not going to be creating commercial value for the shareholders, then I'm going to have to also take some value away from the employees. Instead, how do we set this organization up to get a multiplier effect for everyone so that everyone's cheering each other on? And I think there are great organizations that are doing them. A lot of those organizations are newer companies that are being created with the newer thinking. Without the Milton Friedman, it is about the shareholder. That's the primary, if not exclusive, stakeholder that matters for an organization. Really, I think the great organizations actually kind of put the shareholder in fourth place, because that shareholder is going to derive a tremendous amount of value if the other folks involved in that business are happy over a long period of time. So I think it's about positively reinforcing companies, and I think that's one of the things I love about conscious capitalism. The highlight companies that are a part of that movement, Whole Foods and the Container Store and so many other great businesses that treat their stakeholders with respect.
Creating value for stakeholders is, in part, around a purpose, is a very important part of each of what these CEOs do. It's been there since they started these companies, and it's evolved in a way. There's kind of a flywheel. Once you get them going in the same direction, Kip Tindell often says, the universe conspires to cooperate with you. Once you see these interests as going in the same direction. But if this isn't enough for you, listen to what some other executives say who are not a part of the conscious capitalism movement. Some people you would think are very different from that. First of all, the iconic CEO of General Electric in the 80s and 90s, Jack Welch. Jack Welch says, on the face of it, shareholder value is the dumbest idea in the world. Shareholder value is a result, not a strategy. Your main constituencies, according to Welch, are your employees, your customers, and your products. Well, not quite the way I'd put it, but still the idea that profits are a result in what we're focusing on is that underlying model of how business fits in society. Or Henry Kravis, a buyout expert, sometimes called a corporate raider. He says, you have to focus on all the stakeholders. It's a new thing for us, and we're really hammering. Long-term value is only achieved if growth benefits all stakeholders, from owners to employees, communities, even governments. We're conscious we're fiduciaries to millions of hard-working men and women and university endowments. Trust must be earned over the long haul and maintained constantly. We've not always adequately explained that to the man on the street. Kravitz is, in a way, articulating a summary of this new story. Or one of my favorite quotes from Bill George, now a professor at Harvard Business School, longtime chief executive of Medtronic. He says, serving all your stakeholders is the best way to produce long-term results. Create a growing, prosperous company. Let me be clear about this. There's no conflict between serving your stakeholders and providing excellent returns for shareholders. Let me read that again. There's no conflict between serving all your stakeholders and providing excellent returns for shareholders. It's impossible to have one without the other. However, serving all these stakeholder groups requires discipline, vision, and committed leadership. And finally, for those of you who might be academics, Michael Jensen, economist, inventor of agency theory, and a kind of die-hard shareholder value guy, said, we can learn from the stakeholder theorist how to lead managers and participants in an organization to think more generally and creatively about how the organization's policies treat all the important constituencies of the firm. This includes not just financial markets, but employees, customers, suppliers, the community in which the organization exists, and so on. There's a revolution afoot in business. We're creating new models, we're creating new ideas, and more importantly, we're creating new businesses that put business and society together. This is not easy to do. Don't mistake my enthusiasm for doing this with the idea that I think it's easy. I know it's not. The question I'd like you to ask is, what do you see as the main challenges for companies that are trying to do this? Because next week, I'm going to ask you to think about what you can do in terms of starting a company or in terms of your role as customer or employee.